Hey, super fans, you can join Terry Farrell, the Treksperts in outer space, as we make the trek to the greatest Star Trek locations of all time, everywhere in the known universe, along with a galactic gaggle of Trek and sci-fi celebrities. How much constitutes a gaggle?
Well, at least 2 or 3.
I have never bothered to calculate it.
Well, pre-production has already begun, but you can get some great backer rewards and help us get production going this summer by joining us at makethetrek.com today. That's makethetrek.com. And check out everything you can do to support the Treksperts and Terry Farrell as we boldly go to the greatest Trek locations of all time. We may even tell you what God needs with the starship. The Treksperts are back on the road again as We're back, baby. We're back. The Inglorious Live Tour continues in 2024. And we're visiting some great cities near you. So don't miss a chance to get exclusive Treksperts merchandise, autograph posters, and see us moderate conversations with the biggest stars in the Trek universe, coming to a galaxy or at least a city near you this year, including Richmond, Virginia, Anaheim, California for WonderCon, Oklahoma City, May 24th through 26th, San Diego, California for Comic-Con with Mark and Ashley, July 24th to 28th. But if Mark and Ashley aren't your cup of tea, well, where are they going to find you, Darren?
Well, I'm going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina, July 25th through 28th. Me only. Wow. It's the Trekspert tour.
You get Darren all to yourself. Yeah, and then we'll all be reuniting, and it feels so good in San Jose, California, August 16th to the 18th. I do know the way to San Jose. And maybe we'll go up north to look for the nuclear vessels while we're there. Well, and we're bringing it on all home in Columbus, Ohio, December 6th to the 8th. So if you want to know what guests will be joining us and how to get tickets, go to galaxycon.com, comic-con.org, or trekspertsplus.com. You'll be glad you did. We'll see you around the galaxy.
Join us
next year. Hey, this is Mark A. Altman.
And this is Darren Doctorman.
And I am so excited to be Ashley Miller.
And we are all excited to be the Inglorious
Treksperts with special holiday guest, Robert Meyer Burnett, straight out of the observatory. Welcome, Rob.
Well, I'm glad to be here with all my favorite Herberts. We are one.
I know. And Ashley screws up the whole introduction. We have a template, but then he has to change it.
I had to go
mess
off
the whole thing up. He had to go off book. You know, this is a John Wells show. Just stick to your lines.
Word perfect, people.
Word perfect. Word perfect. You know what happens to cast on John Wells shows that don't stay on book?
They get their own show?
No, they're thrown out of the next episode. If you are either have to look at your sides or change a word on a John Wells show, you're gone from the next episode.
Wow.
Awesome. I love everything
I
about
love that.
Yeah, I know, right?
Be prepared, people.
Yeah.
We're now instituting those rules.
So, first of all, very happy New Year to everybody. It's 2024, the year of
living dangerously.
Isn't it amazing that the best Star Trek movie celebrating an anniversary this year is Star Trek 5? The anniversary of Star Trek 3, 40 years, Generations, 30 years, and at 25 years, and doesn't look a day over 24, Star Trek The Final Frontier.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, wait a second. Hold on. If it's 25 years old, I'm going to say half your age plus 7.
25 years young.
Man. Yeah, Star Trek 5 is still too young for me to date it. That's just sad.
The summer of '89 was a big summer of disappointments. License to Kill, Ghostbusters 2, Last Crusade.
Yes, but there was also The Abyss and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
That's true. That's true.
No, I don't exactly put Honey, I Shrunk the Kids in that same rarefied air.
Because it's a great movie.
It is but it is a great movie. It's true.
89 was also what was that? The second season of Next Gen?
No, 87,
No.
88, 89.
Yeah, the fall of 89 is when the third season premiered.
Yeah, the
and it
third
started
season
being
started.
good.
That's right.
So there's that to be grateful for.
You know what did come out also in the summer of 89 that I have to give mad props to is Lethal Weapon 2.
Lethal Weapon
That's
2 is
true.
great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Diplomatic immunity.
Just been decaffeinated.
They fuck you at the drive-thru. They know you're going to be miles away before
That's
you know
3.
you got fucked.
That's
No,
3.
that's 2.
No, that's
Joe
2.
Pesci didn't come till 3.
That's 2.
No,
he
he
in
was
2?
in 2. He was the guy that
dude.
they had to protect in
Yeah,
the witness protection program.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
I just remember
I'm
the late
Shane
Josh
Blacksburg.
Ackland.
I'm
Yeah.
black. I'm black. No,
I'm
Lethal
black.
Weapon 2 is no, that's when we got.
Right.
Whatever
right,
you
right.
need, Leo gets.
I want to die in the toilet, Riggs.
You know what? You made me want to watch Lethal
Story of my
Weapon 2
life.
again now. I'm excited
So
about
good.
watching it again. We rewatched Lethal
It's
Weapon
so good.
recently, and it was better than I remembered it.
Also
Because
so
I was
good.
never a big Lethal Weapon fan. I was a big Die Hard fan, but not a big Lethal Weapon fan. But I rewatched it again recently, and I liked
It's
it.
a Christmas movie.
It
Watched
is a
again.
Christmas
You know what?
movie.
First
Every
time.
Shane Black movie is a Christmas movie.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
The
Have
man
you ever had
loves
Shane
Christmas.
Black on one of your 900 shows, Rob?
You know what? I've never had him on my. I have not, but I
We should do a
I
show.
used to go to his
all of
movie
us
nights with
Shane
Lucas
Black.
Kendall, and I showed Zulueski's Possession at his house, and
Nice.
he loved it, and everyone else hated it.
Ah,
I was never
Well, you
invited
chose-
back.
you were never invited back. Oh no! Oh my God. Okay.
Shane
Get him
loved
on
it
deck
though.
78.
Well, I'm excited to be back with another holiday special. Today, we're going to be doing, this is a tough one. We're going to be doing Star Trek quotes. But before we get to the top 10 Star Trek quotes, there's some big news coming out of the mountain.
Yeah,
you
maybe.
heard Sherry Lansing is finally potentially ready to sell the whole kit and caboodle.
Not-
or at least
not
give up
Sherry
her-
Lansing.
Not Sherry Lansing. She produced
Lansing.
Fatal Attraction.
What did I say, Sherry Lansing? Oh my God, Sherry Redstone.
Sherry Redstone.
Yes.
Sherry Redstone. I'm so sorry.
I mean,
sorry.
Sherry Lansing, Mark, is now a widow.
No, I know. Poor Bill Friedkin.
The
We
Widow
loved him.
Lansing.
But Sherry Redstone has said it looks like she's willing to sell her majority share in Paramount. Go figure.
In national, in national amusements.
Amusements,
Yep. Are you not amused?
I'm amused.
Yeah.
No.
So
who's
we're
gonna
going to put
get it,
together
do you
a
think?
fund, like a GoFundMe, and try to buy it ourselves and turn it into
We
the
should
Trekspertise
do
Network?
GoFundMe. Oh my God, that's hysterical. We're trying to raise the money to buy Paramount so we
Buy
can save Star
Paramount.
Trek.
So he can control
Oh my
it.
God.
Do you think that David Ellison and his finance company are going to be the people that get it?
I do, and I think it's
I do.
unfortunate because Skydance won't know what to do with Star Trek.
Yeah.
Well,
Well-
at least they might find people who will.
Paramount didn't know what to do with
No, because
Skydance.
Skydance has co-financed all the Star Trek movies,
I know.
and I think to them that's what Star Trek is.
Right.
And I don't think they're, I think given all the stuff, I don't think there'll
Not
be a lot of
based on their
changes.
box office returns, though.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I don't see them making many changes at the top there. Whereas if Disney bought it, which they won't,
Disney can't buy
But that would
anything.
also be a disaster.
between
Disney won't.
no, not at all. Between
Disney-
Feige and Steve Asbell over at Fox,
Disney,
Fuck Steve, we're in
Disney
charge
couldn't
of
even
Star
buy
Trek,
Disney now.
sure.
Look, you know what? Steve and Kevin
Not
should
true.
bail and go to Paramount now anyway.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Steve got to make a Predator movie.
I'm sure they
he got
like
to
the
do an
Titanic,
Alien
but they
movie.
don't want to be on the Titanic. But let's see what the options are. Okay,
Apple
obviously
will buy them.
the smart money is on Skydance buying them, which maybe that's a good thing.
But isn't it funny
think
that
so.
Titanic kept Paramount afloat for many years?
It did. That's the irony of it, isn't it?
And by the
Um,
way, in this holiday season, it still is with the 4K release of Titanic.
Sure.
My hope, like I said, would be that Disney would buy it, but they're not. They're buying Hulu. There's no way they buy Paramount.
I don't understand why you'd want Disney to buy it. It's like they've got the reverse Midas touch now. Everything they touch turns to crap.
Because it's the quality of their executives.
It doesn't matter.
Feige loves
It doesn't
Star
matter
Trek.
the
Asbell
reason.
loves
It
Star
matters
Trek.
the outcome.
Oh yeah, and it'd be
Feige
freaking
loves
good.
Marvel, but like, look
No,
at what
but you're
Marvel's been
blaming
releasing for
Star
the
Wars.
last 5 years.
It's the people that run these silos. So you don't like Star Wars, but that's because of the people that are running that silo. And they still have Andor. So I mean, it's not like this monolithic. Oh, Disney's going to screw up. You think Bob Iger is going to care what they do with Star Trek? It would be people running it who actually love Star Trek potentially.
What about Netflix?
I could see
Netflix,
Netflix. would be interesting. Do they really want to own a studio is the question, right?
I think that it's crazy to me that the trailer for the new Beverly Hills Cop dropped some weeks ago. And it's hard for me to believe that movie, looking as good as it does, is on Netflix and it's not coming out theatrically. So Paramount it's been feeding the Eddie Murphy movies like My Name is Dolomite is My Name, Coming to America 2.
Amazon did Coming to America 2. And it was terrible. Yeah.
It was terrible. But Netflix did Dolomite is My Name.
Yes.
And they're doing Beverly Hills Cop.
My Name is Dolomite, right?
My Name is Dolomite,
yeah. Yeah. But that's, Scott and Larry. That's a testament to Scott and Larry. But Netflix is interesting, Rob. You bring up an interesting point because I think, the interesting thing is Star Trek did not do particularly well for Netflix when, they could, actually bring in, again, it becomes a silo, who they bring in to run Star Trek, right, for them.
Well, the other suitor might be Apple.
Yeah.
Well, that's the real, now that would be fucking great.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Because then
they really would put somebody in charge who loved it and cared about it.
Yeah.
And that's
because
also,
remember, Ron Moore is still at Disney.
Yeah.
Ron Moore is still at Disney. He's not at Sony or Apple anymore, but doesn't mean that they wouldn't bring him back to run Star Trek.
Well, and also because he did co-create For All Mankind, and that's still airing, and that show is basically, in my mind, For All Mankind is a prequel to Star Trek.
Well, and in Ron Moore's too.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that he's under his deal right now is with Disney. It's the same reason he couldn't do Star Trek for Paramount when he was under a deal with Sony back in the day when he was the first choice of Les Moonves to do Star Trek.
When you say he has a deal with Disney, I look at my watch like Lex Luthor,
and realize you weren't wearing a watch.
By the way, I did watch the back
Don't count
5.
on Disney. Disney will rebound. Disney knows what they're doing.
Yeah. I watched the back 5 of For All Mankind season 4.
You underestimate them at your own peril. What'd you say, Rob?
I said I've seen the entire season of season 4 of For All Mankind. I watched the back 5.
Yep.
Dude, I cried 3 times.
Wow. That show has that amazing effect
in the
on
back
people.
5. 3 times.
Wow. Uh-oh. Because I'm at the middle of the season now, and it's great. But as much as I love it, I think I love Slow Horses more.
Well, you know what's, I got to say.
Slow Horses is the bomb.
It is so good. And the 3rd season might be the best. But,
horses are really slow on Mars.
I got to say, though, that
they're not fast because they're
season
lighter.
4 of For All Mankind, it was different than the first 3 seasons.
Yeah.
But where they're taking it and where it's revealed, I think it's revealed in episode 7, there's something that's happening that I didn't see coming that I was like,
on Io? Stay away from Io? All these worlds are yours except for Io?
Nope. Just
Europa.
something.
Europa. Exactly. Sorry.
It's just a course of action that. It's
Io
really
adjacent.
great.
I can't get these things right. It's like,
it's okay.
Man, Peapot Whistle,
It's all right.
Europa, Io. I mean, come on. But I can tell you, Netflix would be a good home for Paramount. Amazon could buy them. They got the war chest.
Yeah.
I don't see it being done well there.
They could make it almost as good as Rings of Power.
Oof.
Look, I still might, I think that, if it ended up at Disney, Feige would run it, be great. Because he loves Star Trek.
Yep.
He does.
He gets it. And then, this Apple would be great. Because, we're not just talking, obviously for the purpose of the show, we're saying, what would a Paramount sale mean to Star Trek?
Right.
But there's so many other great franchises, too, that, or movies that would be in the mix as well. But we're not really talking about those. Right. We're really focusing it through a Star Trek lens.
Like Top Gun, the TV series.
Right. Well, look, the thing is, Disney is never going to buy Paramount because they don't need what Paramount is offering.
Right.
There is no real franchise there that Disney gives a shit about. Star Trek, just in terms of the bottom line, isn't worth enough to them.
No, of course, Star Trek's not even part of the equation.
Yeah. It hasn't even made money at the theatrical level in the last 15 years.
We're talking about through a Star Trek prism. But again, this is not somebody who buys Paramount. It's not because of Star Trek. It has nothing to. It's like they get
want
Star Trek
something
as
else.
part of the deal, but it's not. I mean,
That's why I think Apple is actually not an insane choice. Like I've been waiting for them to buy Sony forever, but they're apparently not going to do that. But having an actual studio,
well, you get the lot,
a good ad.
You get a huge library. They still have a huge library, which they need, and
that whole parking lot on Lemon Grove.
Yeah, which is great. You got a big tank, which is you can turn into a
The
pool.
one thing I hope is it's not a situation where someone comes in and buys the library and everything, and then
Just
they
to
sell the
sell it
lot
off.
for the real estate, because that would be tragic to lose that
Yeah,
lot.
it would. It'd be a disaster.
But that is a real possibility.
100%. They'll expand the cemetery. But I mean, but that part of town,
In more ways than
they
one.
could turn it into office buildings and condos.
Yeah.
That would be to me like the death of Los Angeles. Like it would be awful. It'd be worse than when Fox sold off half their lot for Century City.
Yeah.
I really hope it doesn't. There's so much history there, but it's not impossible to believe, because there's so much value in that real estate that may help them pay for a sale. Because what about Comcast? Because that's a real viable buyer. What do you think would happen if Universal bought Paramount?
Again, I don't see the up in that transaction.
Yeah, I don't see the business case on it. Like what they get out of
if they
Paramount.
need to help Peacock. So if they combine Paramount Plus and Peacock, and they have a library, and they've been looking, because remember, they were the ones who were competing with Fox competing with Disney to buy Fox, and they lost out on Fox. Their economies of scale. So buying Paramount for Comcast might be a good move for them.
Then why are they taking all of the programming off of Peacock?
They're not taking all their programs. They're licensing some, but they still need to have a deep library.
Well, yeah, but Galactic is gone.
Yeah, so what?
So what?
So they can
That's all we
license
care
it.
about. That's all we care
So
about.
you care. Well, I have it on Blu-ray, so I don't care if it's on Peacock.
So do I, but we like to.
So Rob, we were talking about
gospel.
whether or not Comcast would be a suiter for Paramount.
But wouldn't that be antitrust? Wouldn't that be a really hard merger?
The whole thing is antitrust.
Yeah, but these mergers always get approved, no matter how much people squawk about antitrust monopoly. They always get approved.
I mean, look, I think what I find distressing about all of this, we've seen Warner Brothers merge with Discovery. When they do this, they incur so much debt. They're immediately behind the eight ball, and then everything suffers. Mm-hmm. And what we need is somebody like an Apple to buy a Paramount, because they have, like you said, a war chest. They have plenty of money. And the funny thing that people don't understand about Apple is I keep hearing people going, Killers of the Flower Moon was like $200 billion and it's never going to earn its money back.
They don't care.
They don't care. They don't understand that.
That's
not
what's
the point.
good about Apple.
Yeah, the economics of what Apple's doing with their programming is not to make. I mean, everybody wants to make money, of course, but they could probably, as far as I understand it, write off that budget as marketing.
Yeah.
Their
well, there's a concept. There's two things that kind of at work as basic, getting a degree in marketing 101. First, there is the idea of the Halo car, right? It's when a car maker builds a car that is incredibly expensive, that nobody can afford, that they probably end up losing their shirt on, but it establishes the value of the brand. Right? It's the thing that makes you go, this is aspirational for me. The other thing is the loss leader, right? Loss leader is very similar to the Halo car. The loss leader is a thing you put a shitload of money in, because people look at it and they say, wow, look at that. That stands for quality. And because that stands for quality, everything else associated with that is quality. That is what Apple invested in with Killers of the Flower Moon and Napoleon, and you name it.
Totally. And they won Oscars.
By the way, premiering next fall on Apple is Halo car.
Yeah. Although I'm also watching Tehran on Apple, which is good. Rob, have you watched Tehran?
Yeah, it's really all of their shows. I mean, even Invasion, that has the most boring alien invasion ever in the first season, is beautifully made. But I love Tehran. I love, was it a Blackbird? The Taron Egerton, he goes into prison.
I haven't seen that.
It's fantastic. And just fantastic. And everything they make is, I love looking at it, at least.
I hope they're doing a 4th season of Slow Horses, because man, that show is awesome.
Me too.
But the other person who's not going to buy Paramount is Warner Brothers, But, this is too bad because you could do a great Firefox Top Gun crossover. Maverick has to steal the stealth plane from Russia. And he thinks in Russian. How great would that be?
Tom Cruise. My agent now.
It's Mission Impossible meets Firefox.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Chris McQuarrie's Firefox too.
And they have to find that one pilot who did it before. And we cut to Clint Eastwood on his deathbed.
Tom Cruise teams up with Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Lowell Gantz. Gant.
Gant.
No, I'm thinking Lowell
Gantz, the writer.
And Babalu Mandel.
Yeah.
Babalu.
Hilarious.
Oh, God damn it. Now I'm going to find out. I'm going to go straight to the, Firefox. Not Foxfire, which is
different.
It's Maverick and Mitchell Gant. That's the buddy cop movie of the year, except they're pilots.
Yeah.
Planes.
It's Angelina Jolie, and she's learning about her burgeoning sexuality.
What?
Mitchell Gant. Clint Eastwood. Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't that already burgeon?
Okay.
Yeah, burgeoned
so we're
many
here
years
to
ago.
talk about Star Trek quotes. Star Trek quotes. This is the 10 greatest Star Trek quotes ever. Continuing our series of holiday specials where we're doing 10 top 10 lists. And it's been wildly successful. And for those of you who, many people have commented, many people have expressed their opinions, we're going to do a post-mortem show. I guess you could consider it the 11th holiday special where we'll come back and we'll read your missives and discuss, where you think we went wrong, where we did, where we got it right. Well, we got everything right, but we
always get it right.
Debate it. So we'll be reading those letters. So if you haven't gotten it in through social, Facebook, or email, please go to X at Inglorious Trek or on Facebook at Inglorious Treksperts, or you can email us at trekspertsplus@gmail.com, and we may read your letter on the air, particularly if it's fawning and complimentary. No, we're just kidding. Actually, we want to know your actual thoughts, so please send them.
Now, especially if they're fawning and complimentary.
Today, we're doing top 10 quotes. And, of course, Star Trek is an incredibly literate show, isn't it, Rob?
It is a very literate show, and I think it was written by men and women of letters, and I think that's one of the great things about the show. It's very funny when you go back and you watch, especially the original series now, because of the colors. Obviously, they want to sell color TVs and the pop sci-fi of it all. But then there's profundity in it in almost every episode. Even in episode like Spock's Brain, you get the idea of the givers of pain and delight. There's always something. There's always a nugget of intellectual awesomeness in every episode of Star Trek.
There's sometimes poetry in stupid.
Yes. Yes.
Just ask my children.
Well put.
Yeah.
I agree. But and that's one of the great things about the show. And some of the writers of the era, and a lot of people that worked on Twilight Zone worked on Star Trek, Richard Matheson, for instance. And it's great. Robert Bloch.
Yeah.
George Clayton Johnson.
Well, I got to say, I think of all the lists we've done, this may be the most difficult because thankfully there's so many great Star Trek quotes, particularly in the early shows. That's not a slag in any way on what came later, but it just felt like there was more profundity because it was dealing with bigger issues. And but we'll see. We'll see what shows up on the on this. So much great writing. And I think distilling it down to...
And also the fun of the writing being so quotable. Because, just hearing your buddy talking about, how he fixed the air conditioner isn't quotable, right? And I'm not comparing that to any modern shows, but that's sort of the thing that you get. You need to have a little bit more fun in the writing to be able to quote it.
Yeah, I think there's a combination of humor, profundity, memorableness, just literacy. It'll be very interesting to see how our top 10 shakes out. And I'm sure many of you are thinking, how do your favorite quotes compare with our quotes? I don't know if these are favorite quotes as much as we feel they're the best quotes, memorable quotes, significant quotes, witty, profound, smart. And we're about to find out what they are, starting with Darren and number 10 in our top 10 Star Trek quotes ever.
Well, number 10 is a good one because it comes up a couple times in the various, let's call them episodes that they appear in. And I'm just going to say that I'm going to, each quote I'm doing in this list, I'm going to endeavor to do it in character. So I can't speak for my compatriots. They're welcome to do or not do as they see fit, but I'm going to read them to the best of my ability as the character that said it. So number 10 first appeared in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And it is quoted by Spock, and it is,
"The needs of the many outweigh
the needs of the few,
or the one."
It's a great quote because it sounds like something that is a quote in itself from something else, but it's not. And it's fascinating that it leaves you thinking again of a bigger universe, and that maybe it was first quoted by the Mars Shakespeare, Mars Shakespeare. But I think it's very thematic for the film itself, and its inverse pops up in Star Trek III, a little bit clunky, but it's not bad. And it also shows up in Star Trek IV when Amanda, Spock's mother, mentions
Amanda Hug and Kiss.
Yes.
Well, it also, in a way, a riff on it does show up in Star Trek 3 too.
No, that's what I said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's inverse.
Star Trek 3 too, or Star Trek 3 as well?
Star Trek 3 as well, I was going to say.
Star Trek 3 Part 2, which is Star Trek 4. It's a great quote, and it adds weight where there kind of isn't any, but it fakes it well. So that's why it's number 10 on our list of Star Trek quotes.
Well, what's so interesting is that Nick Meyer, who's an extremely literate individual, extremely erudite, and if you didn't know that, he'll remind you. But the thing about Nick is, so many quotes from Shakespeare. Even the original title of Star Trek was an allusion to Shakespeare, The Undiscovered Country, which he then used for Star Trek VI when he had the juice to use that as an actual title.
Right.
Which
even though he changed the meaning of it completely.
Yeah, true. But quotes from Moby Dick, But what is a testament to his brilliant writing on Star Trek II, and to an extent on 4 and 6, is his ability to forge his own quotes that have become part of the lexicon that stand alongside those legendary quotes. This quote that he gives us, that's our number 10 pick, about the good of the many.
Needs of the many.
The needs of the many is so powerful and says so much. I think, and I have to say, not to get off on a tangent here, but I know some of you like this, that is at the very heart of our problem with Star Trek 3, because Star Trek 2 delivers this really potent message. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, right? The good of the few or the one. And it's saying self-sacrifice for the common good is this noble thing. Yeah. Right. Sometimes, whether it's a person in a platoon that jumps on a grenade to save their friends, whatever, in war, in peace, and here Spock sacrifices himself to save the ship. Yeah, fantastic. Star Trek 3, it basically inverts that and says, no, my selfish needs are more important than the imperative of doing a moral good. And I don't like that about Star Trek 3. I hate the reverse of this, that Kirk's need, the good of the one is more important than the good of the many. I hate that, but I do love this quote in Star Trek 2. And I think it's one of so many quotes from that movie that could have been. And anyone who listens to this podcast hears us quoting Star Trek 2 all the freaking time. And it's no wonder because there's so many great quotes. What if they went nowhere? Do you need a tranquilizer? I mean, but a lot of these are funny, podcast. Like funny asides. This has a profundity that I think ends up on the list. But we could go through. Have you changed your hairstyle? I mean, so many.
She changed her hair.
Great quotes throughout that movie. I'm not a theater critic.
Ashley has a response that he's been trying to get.
Ashley has a retort.
I do have a retort. Now, I would not presume to debate you, which would be wise. We all my issues with Star Trek 3 are I think we are all on the same page on that. However, here is my counter to your position on what appears to be an inverse of Star Trek 2's theme as Star Trek 3. I would argue that in fact it's not. That in fact it is an extension of the theme of Star Trek 2. Here's the difference. In Star Trek 2, what Spock was faced with was a crew filled with, by the way, children, people that he wasn't necessarily close to, didn't know. There were larger responsibilities that were at stake, and no one had really made a choice to be in that situation. Spock makes a choice. He sacrifices himself, and he does it not just for the good of his friends. He does it for the good of the ship. He does it for the good of the Federation. He does it for the greater good.
It's in Star Trek 3. It's the Vulcan response to the problem.
Yes, 100%. It is perfectly logical. In Star Trek 3, it's important that Kirk tells everybody, I can't make you do this. And he's not going to. Everyone who is on the Enterprise, after they steal it or when they're stealing it, is making a choice. They are each individually making a choice to sacrifice themselves for the good of their friend. And that's just as valid a sacrifice as the one that Spock made.
Because it's the human response.
Exactly. And there's nothing about it that thematically, I think, undoes Star Trek 2. If somehow they had all been corralled into it and it was in order and it was something that they were just kind of doing and they were risking the lives of people who weren't involved, I would completely agree. But I think in this case, it's not really sometimes the good of the one out. God damn it! Now I'm doing it. The needs of the one outweighs like the needs of the many. I don't know that it's really that, because they have a choice. That's it.
Yeah, I disagree with that, but I think it's a very selfish comment on the point of Kirk. He's saying, that Spock's life is more important to him than the good of many, because he's asking these people to do something that's potentially going to get them killed because he's desperate to have Spock back. But more importantly than that, this is a debate for our great Star Trek 3 show that's coming up. So I don't want to go down this road. Rob is just like... Rob, you look like you want to weigh in before we move on from this subject.
Well, no, look, one of the things I think about great Star Trek quotes is they transcend the movie that they're in or the show or the episode that they're in. And the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one is something that people can say in their own lives. And it becomes true. Like the good of the group, sometimes you have to put yourself outside of the equation and think about what's best for everybody. And since I saw that movie, when I saw Wrath of Khan in 82, I was younger. I was a much younger man. And that idea has kind of, in the same way that boldly go became sort of a mantra that I would say to myself, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one is something that I've always said when I'm working in group environments. And obviously working in the entertainment business, you're frequently working in a group. And I think it's a philosophy, an ethos that can serve most people well, especially in this day and age when everything is me, 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 me. Look at me. If I don't feel good, I'm going to make it your problem.
Yeah.
And we live in that world now. We live in that world where people are not they're not thinking about the greater good. They're not thinking about the greater community. They're not thinking about how can I help to make other people's lives better. Everyone's worrying about themselves.
Yeah, Rob, you know where I thought that this quote really resonated? Because I know you've read a lot of these firsthand accounts of all these heroic Israelis during the attacks again by the barbaric Hamas, who would basically sacrifice their lives to save other people that day, and send, would stay there and throw grenades back while everyone was escaping, or would rush into harm to go back to the music festival to try and get more people out. When, and it's just, there's so many of these stories that are so remarkable of true heroism, where they put the needs of the many outweigh their own personal safety. And, I thought about this, as being something that was very much, of the way that people thought. It's not about, people looking out just for themselves, but looking out for the greater good.
But, I also, to speak to Star Trek 3, though, I know what you guys are saying, but if there's a possibility that they could get Spock back, and Kirk feels this way, his compatriots are not being drawn into his folly. They all know that the universe is a better place if Spock is in it. And they're willing to make that sacrifice. When Uhura says all our hopes, it's because she realizes that if we succeed and if there's a possibility we can save his eternal soul, we owe it to the universe to make sure that Spock is here, because to have Spock in the universe is to benefit the needs of the many. His presence will benefit all of us. It's not just Kirk getting his friend back.
I wish that was in the movie, because I think that's a really good point. Okay, so that brings us to number 9, and Ashley Edward Miller. And this, at number 9, it's actually number 9, number 9.5, because we have a tie.
We do have a tie. Both of these quotes come from episodes, very different shows, but the episodes, the stories within those episodes are thematically linked, and in some ways linked by their stories. They're both time travel stories. They're both stories where our heroes go back to a simpler and more dangerous time, where the stakes are different, where they have nothing, where, in both cases, they need to make, tricorders out of stone knives and bear skins. And in one case, literally, the first quote comes from The City on the Edge of Forever, Edith Keeler, and I will read it in the voice of Joan Collins as she is now. No, I won't. I'm not going to do that. So the quote is,
"Now, I don't pretend to tell you how to find happiness in love when every day is just a struggle to survive. But I do insist that you do survive, because the days and the years ahead are worth living for."
The second quote comes from the Deep Space Nine episode, Past Tense. It's a Dr. Bashir quote.
"Causing people to suffer because you hate them is terrible. But causing people to suffer because you have forgotten how to care, that's really hard to understand."
Now, I will say this about the second quote. If I had a red pen and I could go back in time myself, I would cut out the adverb really. And I'll tell you why. Because when you throw in the really, Robert Wolf, if you're listening to this, when you throw in the really, you're suggesting that it's worse. And in some ways undercutting the meaning of the line, which is I can understand doing terrible things to people because you hate them. What I can't understand is forgetting how to care. But that said, the line is still great, and what it communicates is still great. Just like Edith Keeler's line is great. Both of these quotes are talking about what it means to be in Starfleet, what it means to be a Starfleet officer, and what the Federation is. It is about giving a crap about people and remembering that is truly your first duty, is to take care of people, whether you know them or you don't, and to remember that no matter how bad things seem right now, things can and will, in the fullness of time, get better.
In fact, Ashley, that was the motto of Starfleet for so many years, giving a crap about people.
So many craps given.
Yeah.
But in Latin.
Right.
Yeah, those are both wonderful quotes, 30 years apart.
Yeah.
Harlan's or Gene Kuhn or DC Fontana, whoever actually wrote that line. It really is an encapsulation of the Star Trek philosophy, isn't it? Every day may be a struggle, but ultimately you get through it because things are going to be better, right? That's what she's saying.
Right.
So it is the Star Trek, it's the ethos of Star Trek right there. And in the same way, many years later, Robert Wolfe captures that again when he talks about the fact that it's easy to give in to hate, but empathy ultimately is a really important quality. Really, really powerful words from both of them in two completely different episodes. And obviously, City on the Edge, I think, is a lot better episode than Past Tense. But Past Tense, what it has going for it is it's very provocative. It's very, it's trying to do what classic Trek did. It dealing with a contemporary issue of homelessness, really on the nose. So there's a lot about it that's special, even if it doesn't completely work. The idea of creating these homeless ghettos in the future, which I think is this year, according to Star Trek.
Yeah, and the ghetto is called Los Angeles. It's so weird.
Right.
But I
think it's Santa Monica or Beverly Hills.
I admire the attempt, even if the execution is flawed. But there's some wonderful stuff, and it's one of the earlier strong performances from Avery. When he was still wrestling with that role, because when he could relate something to real life, he was usually better than when he was doing the sci-fi stuff.
Yeah, he really comes to life when he is Sisko portraying Gabriel Bell. He's a man dressed up as a man, playing another man.
Playing another dude.
And playing another dude.
What is this, Tropic Thunder?
Yeah.
What do you think, Rob?
Well, I agree with my esteemed colleagues. I mean, and also, it's also about the what Star Trek is about. And for all of us, for the viewers, I mean, it definitely has a strong point of view that it's trying to impart to the audience, and it's also calling on the audience to act. Both of these quotes. It's like, look, there's a future worth living for, and you need to do whatever you can to stick around and not just see it, but participate in it. Otherwise, it's a waste of material.
Right.
And the same is true of what Bashir is saying. I mean, the idea is that why would you possibly allow, I mean, they don't get into the sanctity of life, but I always, this is such a weird thing to say, but I always think about The Watchmen, the comic, The Watchmen, and it's in the movie too, but in the comic, it's better. The reason that Dr. Manhattan decides to go back to Earth and stop nuclear apocalypse from happening is because he realizes that even though there's 8 billion people on the planet, the thermodynamic miracle of life, every single human being that's ever existed is unique. Even if you have a twin, you're unique in the cosmic infinitude of space. And that simple fact means that every one of us, every single human being, every single sentient being is unique in the universe and is worth preserving for that, for no other reason than that. But people should be expected to step up, kind of like the needs of the many. But it should be a requirement that we respect life, we respect one another, but we also respect ourselves.
Yeah.
And that we have a part to play. And that there are certain things that are like, I feel like nowadays in the world, people are like, nah, man, it's my truth, whatever. And I'm like, no, it's not whatever. And it's not your truth. There is the truth. And the fact is, we expect you to step up. And that's what Star Trek always did. It was like, you have the potential to change the universe. And you never know when that moment might come, but your actions could save an infinite amount of people. But you have to
say in every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
Well, we're going to get to that.
Good say that.
We're going to get to that. But that's kind of what I mean. And that's what Star Trek has always sort of, look, have I always lived my life that way? Certainly not. but I've always aspired to. I've always wanted to. Maybe that's why every year
look at Gene Roddenberry. He was the same way.
Yeah.
He aspired to it. He didn't get there. He was Moses. He never made it into the promised land, but he aspired to it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, we're also human. So we suffer from human foibles and desires and all those things. But I think anybody who's a Star Trek fan does have their eye on the prize to a certain extent.
Don't destroy the one named Kirk.
Yeah, we both find that in both of these quotes find that.
Right.
And I think they're important.
And Darren, you got to say, I don't want to be a spoiler here, but boy, that quote did not make the list, and boy, that's a good one. It just shows how many great quotes there are.
It is.
The Corbomite maneuver, which is sort of the Dr. Boyce's quote from The Cage. They're very similar, but both those speeches are fantastic.
That's actually from Balance
of Terror, didn't I say?
Balance of Terror. No, you said Corbomite.
Yeah, you said Corbomite maneuver.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it wouldn't be me if I wasn't messing
Mark, do you smell bread?
What the hell, man? I'm telling you. I swear.
Many such quotes are possible.
Yeah. Well, that's a great quote. And that brings us to number 8. Number 8, I think, is a very powerful quote. We've talked about the virtues of this episode many times. Obviously, it's an indictment of the McCarthy era, which is a little late to the party. But unfortunately, the idea of suppressing thoughts and ideas is a tale as old as time. And it used to be solely the province of the right. It is now, unfortunately, just as much problem with the far left in terms of suppressing free speech and ideas. And there's a lot of talk about being free speech absolutists. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but
and why that's not a badge of honor.
I can tell you that the idea of censoring books and banning books and trying to suppress thoughts is not a good thing. And this is a case that Star Trek made very strongly and very firmly in the episode The Drumhead. And this quote is Jean-Luc Picard from that episode. And the quote is as follows.
There are some words I've known since I was a schoolboy. But the first link the chain is forged, the first speech censured, the first thought forbidden, the first freedom denied, chains us all irrevocably. Those words were uttered by Judge Aaron Satie as wisdom and warning. The first time any man's freedom is trodden on, we're all damaged.
And again, much better performed by Patrick Stewart than myself, but a very, very effective case about the value of freedom, and in this case, accusations that are being made against Picard, false accusations. Again, very much in the McCarthy, HUAC era kind of paradigm, but you can apply the thoughts being expressed here to much more recent events as well, whether it's cancel culture, any of these things that we certainly, the book burning so many states that are attempting to ban books in libraries or in schools, which is just horrifying, and we know where that leads. But very, very powerfully expressed by Patrick Stewart. It's a wonderful quote written by Jerry Taylor, who did the rewrite on that episode, and a very effective bottle show for money saver for Star Trek, with some great thoughts at its core.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though in my mind that episode is a bit on the nose and not very allegorical, it's still an engaging episode with some great speeches and great ideas.
Yep, I love that episode. On the nose as it may be, I think sometimes there's some nails that you do have to hit on the head, and that's one of them.
Bonk, bonk on the head.
Bonk, bonk on the head. Tell him, Jim.
I think it's very important, and not that this episode necessarily did it, but reminding us where censorship leads, and the fact that in the 50s, many people were afraid to express their thoughts because it was dangerous. They could lose their livelihood, they could lose their freedom, all because they expressed an opinion that was deemed wrong or damaging or considered communists. But this is a really interesting episode. The fact that Picard stands up to this drumhead trial that he's faced with, and it's great because there are few actors who can deliver a powerful speech the way that Patrick Stewart could. And when he's given the right material, good material, he really delivers. We used to talk about the Kirk monologue, which is just amazing. It's just stunning. But Stewart obviously could deliver a really great monologue as well, but often didn't get the caliber of writing that Shatner got. But this is a case where he's getting something and really chews into it and is terrific. So a great quote from the Drumhead by Jean-Luc Picard, which is our number 8 pick. And that brings us to number 7 and Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, one of the things that Star Trek would like all the great fantasy shows not all the great, but the fantasy shows of the 50s and 60s, like Twilight Zone or Outer Limits and things like that, was they couldn't address things directly necessarily because of network standards and practices, but sometimes they did. And in a first season original series episode, one of the greatest episodes of Star Trek ever, Balance of Terror, in the middle of the civil rights era, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, the term Malcolm X, the turmoil of the era, racism was at the forefront. And there's a great, one of the things, they're doing a submarine war story, but they took a moment to address racism directly, to the point of actually the one and only time when the word bigotry left the mouth of William Shatner. And it's during this moment, there's a revelation in this episode, and it was shocking to watch when I was a kid. I'm like, what? Where the Romulans, who were never seen during the Romulan War with Earth, it's suspected that they have ties to the Vulcans, but we don't know. And Lieutenant Stiles, who's a member of the bridge crew, he had family members dying in the Romulan War, their death attributed to Romulans. So he was understandably pissed off about the legacy of violence that took members of his family. And when they finally tap into the bridge of the Romulan bird of prey, they see that there is, in fact, a striking resemblance between the Romulans and the Vulcans. And immediately the way they play it is Stiles. There's a great moment when he just turns his head and looks at Spock, and then they do this, a few quick cuts, and Spock himself raises his eyebrow because even he's surprised.
Yes.
But then Stiles now is making it a point that he's hitting, in case you didn't get it, he's pissed. And he immediately turns his ire towards Spock himself. And suddenly, doesn't matter what Spock has done, doesn't matter his track record of proving himself over and over and over and over and over again that he is beyond reproach in terms of his honor and his ability. Stiles now, all of that has been washed away and is making, under his breath comments about Spock's ability. Why don't you ask Spock? Insinuating that he might know something about the Romulans. And in true Star Trek fashion, Kirk calls him on it. Kirk actually flat out says,
"Leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge."
And it's almost like Kirk was talking to an entire nation when he said that. And indeed he was, because America was still a very racist nation. We weren't very far away from Jim Crow laws, obviously. And the sentiment was there. But what's interesting is they could have, this is why Star Trek was great, they could have just vilified Stiles and made him a racist. But then he brings up a point. He brings up a very salient point. I'm just trying to point out that with this similarity, there could be Romulan spies aboard this ship. Because if they look like Vulcans, they could have infiltrated our society. We don't know. And even though he's a bigot, it comes across as bigotry. He also has a pragmatic reason for stating, and which is often the case when people are bigots. They have a reason that justifies their bigotry. And it's pretty layered and interesting. But Kirk flat out says, and he wasn't just talking to Styles, he was talking to everybody watching the show.
Yeah,
there is no room for bigotry here. And I love it because it's direct, and Shatner's delivery. I mean, you're not gonna, if he said that to me, I'm like, oh, no. You're right, sir. I'm very sorry, sir. Very sorry, sir. I mean, it's a great bit. It's quick. Like Darren said about the last quote, it's a little on the nose, but very necessary.
And he just snaps it off. It's very military.
Yeah.
It's almost like I am doing other shit right now, but I'm not going to tolerate that. So you're going to stow it and we're going to move on.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm snapping you down, Lieutenant.
Yep.
What's so interesting, though, about this, it seems so, it doesn't seem like that powerful statement today, but you got to remember this is the time of, the March Against Fear. This was the time of the Civil Rights Act of 1966, didn't pass in the Senate, which all it said was basically it would bar racial discrimination in selling or renting housing, right? It seems like something that would go without saying, right? And it was rejected by, in the Senate. So for Captain Kirk, in the midst of all the civil rights struggles that are going on in the 60s, to say there's no room for bigotry on the bridge, and the person expressing that bigotry is to a character we all love, Mr. Spock, the Vulcan, to use a Vulcan as a stand-in, because obviously we've outgrown, you couldn't make it Uhura, you couldn't make it because we're all equal in the future. So we're saying he was part of a war, against the Romulans, who were a lot like the Vulcans, but it's also like, people who, have problems with people in the past that they may have, encountered. It's like the Turks hating, or whatever. It's just really, it's a really potent message. And the fact that Kirk says it with such power, I mean, I believe he spins him around in his chair, and basically says, we're not going to tolerate this. We're not going to stand for bigotry. Is such an impressive statement. It says a lot about Captain Kirk, because a lot of people, somebody says something that like that and they don't want to make trouble. They just they don't call them out on their shit. They just let it go and see if it happens again. But Captain Kirk immediately says, this isn't going to fly on my ship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Styles hears him.
He does.
And their frank discussion. It's not like Styles pushes back. Right. I think Styles in our Star Trek future realizes what he's done. And that's why he turns around and says, okay, I'm a bigot. I've been bigoted, but I do have a point to make here. And his point is a well-taken point, but I still think he learns. And nowadays, I mean, people would get indignant. And I think it shows that you can still say things to people in that future, and people hear one another.
The other thing that's important about Styles is he didn't walk into that scene with a pre-existing negative feeling about Spock.
Right.
It wasn't, he's got pointy ears and green blood, right? That's Dr. McCoy's line. Mm-hmm. Green-blooded, pointy-eared Vulcan. He's got an issue because suddenly he goes, oh, crap. He looks like the enemy, right? Yeah. And that's a fine line. I mean, everything that you've said is absolutely correct, Rob and Mark. So I'm not disagreeing with anything. I just think that it's an interesting distinction to make. Like this is not like, oh, how'd you get like one bad apple in the Starfleet officers? You didn't. Right. You had a guy who thought everything was cool up until the moment that the scary thing showed up on screen.
Right.
And he had a moment of weakness, which he recognized, but could also justify logically.
The face of his entire past pain.
Yes.
Well,
looks like Spock.
Well, because his family had died at the hands of the Romulans.
That's right.
In the Romulan War. So there was this cultural, antipathy he had. I mean, look, it's interesting because I remember when I was much younger, family that like wouldn't buy a German car and that didn't like Germans because to them they were all Nazis, right? But you have to go beyond that and judge people on the content of their character, not as a race, and
I think that's a very important message today.
Yeah, 100%. right? Not all Muslims, not all Arabs are freaking Hamas, right? So it's very important to understand these things. And I think that is a big part of this too. It's not just racism. It's xenophobia, and what seems like a very simple line actually has much more powerful meaning than we're ascribing to it, particularly when you look at what the payoff of this line is, which is that Styles is demoted down. Well, he's sent down to phaser control, and he almost, and as clumsy as it is, let's admit, he almost dies if it isn't for Mr. Spock. Right. Why is it clumsy? Why during this, serious battle, and cat and mouse is Spock walking the hallways,
because it's a constructed convenience.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, clearly we can acknowledge when, we sing the praises of the show. We can also acknowledge when something is a little, contrived.
We can admire it and be against it at the same time.
Yes. And it is contrived, but it's also powerful. The fact that Spock saves Styles, he would be dead if it wasn't for Spock. And this is the guy he was just saying, that he was clearly prejudiced against. But Spock doesn't, not rescue him because this guy was prejudiced against him. And in fact, by saving him, he kind of changes Styles' feeling about Vulcans and about Spock.
Hopefully, yeah.
Well, we would hope,
yeah. Well, I think something that Ashley said is incredibly hilarious. That McCoy is the biggest bigot against Vulcans on the ship. You know that deep down he loves Spock, right? But he's the loudest one of them all.
But that's a really good point you make, because his words make him sound like a bigot, right?
Right.
But
his heart is
not what he means. Yeah. He's sort of jabbing him to get a reaction out of him. And McCoy would be canceled today, right? Because if you just go by his words and not the meaning, it would be like, oh, this guy is a racist against the Vulcans, right? How could you talk to him? You're saying all these things that you should be canceled for, right? But that's not what he means,
right?
Right?
You have to judge people by their actions, not by their words.
Because he loves Spock, and he cares for Spock,
right? And he hates himself for it.
And it's just, and he's prodding him. It's playful. Yeah. Their banter. And we've always said this, and we said this in our Bible episode. He could have that relationship with Spock because Spock could take it. Whereas with Zahn, where they had him doing the same, or when Muldaur did it to Data, it was a different dynamic. Because it was just mean to Data.
Right.
Whereas...
Because Data's stupid.
Because Data doesn't get what and she just generally seemed to despise him. Whereas, Captain, McCoy generally loves Spock.
Right.
Right.
Captain McCoy?
Are you sure about that? They all get promoted to Admiral. That's another problem I have with these shows. Everyone's always promoted to Admiral. Is everyone really that good? How many admirals are there?
Yeah, credit to Ira Bear for
becoming admiral, Patrick Stewart becoming admiral. It's like, big Picard. Like, why is everyone a freaking admiral?
Well, I just hate everyone being promoted, but they're still in the same job.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. That was one of the nice things about Picard season 3. At least, Riker is on another ship. They're not like still on the Enterprise 20 years later, going around the universe. Nothing's changed. I mean, it's like Star Trek 2, and that actually time has moved on, which is always nice. Star Trek 1 did that too.
Yeah.
For all people's criticism, Star Trek 1. Oh God, I saw on Facebook the other day. I don't even know why I see this stuff. Somebody said, should I watch Star Trek 1? I haven't watched it in a long time. Is it any good? I love when people ask. Like, they're asking people.
They're just out there baiting people. That's all.
You're baiting them.
Yeah. You're luring him in.
Why would you? It's like when I asked the waiter, should I have the medium, the ribeye, or the fillet? Like, what do I care? I don't know what their tasted food is. I don't know if it's anything like me. Why am I asking them? Maybe because they've tried it a lot and they have some expertise in the food. I don't know. But when you ask, like, generally the world on the internet, like, should I watch Star Trek 1 again? Who cares?
Yeah,
what qualifies them to tell you anything?
Only if you have no choice in your mind. Only if you have no discernment at all. Yeah,
why don't you
go
just
ahead.
try
do
it
what
and
you
see?
want.
Do it because it was what you wish to do. Yeah. And yes, you should watch Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Of course.
Again.
The director's edition.
Either one.
No, not either one.
Not either one.
Either one's fine. Look, the final version is better, but you can watch either one. Just don't watch the ABC cut.
Definitely don't watch the ABC cut.
Unless you just wanted to bring back memories.
Unless you want to hear plywood floors being walked on.
You want to see. I forgot. You guys fixed the soundstage.
Yes.
In the ABC cut. So I'm surprised people didn't complain about that. But it's not genuinely the ABC cut because you fixed it.
that shot was never in the ABC cut.
No, it was when he comes out of the airlock.
It was window boxed, so you didn't see any of the ceiling.
Really?
Yeah.
I kind of remember seeing the stage.
No, you're remembering the Laserdisc.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's it. Right, because in 133 you didn't see it. You only saw it in 185.
You didn't see the ceiling. That's why they put it in. They didn't care. They didn't care.
Okay, I got to ask people on the internet what they think.
Yeah.
Okay. So that brings us to number 6, and we're back with Ashley Edward Miller as we count down our 10 greatest Star Trek quotes of all time.
So this isn't the quote, but one of the most important themes running through Deep Space Nine was the idea that it's easy to be a saint in paradise.
Or a saint in the city, according to Bruce Springsteen.
That's true, but Bruce Springsteen was not a Starfleet officer.
Nor was he a saint.
He was none of those things, but he did have the E Street Band, who also are not on a Star Trek show. But anyway, that was a question that Deep Space Nine wrestled with again and again and again. What do you do when you're not in paradise anymore? What do you do when Utopia is under attack and it's threatening to fall apart, right? It's hard choices become a part of your day-to-day life. And an episode that really illustrated that better than almost any other episode of the show because of the choices that it presented to Captain Sisko. And by the way, we were talking about the Admiral thing. Ira once famously said that he talked about promoting Sisko to Admiral, but he decided that Star Trek was a show about captains, and he wasn't going to do that. I think Ira showed great wisdom. But the episode was in the pale moonlight, one of the best, certainly one of the very best Deep Space Nine episodes, one of the greatest Star Trek episodes of all time. And the line in question is the final captain's log from Captain Benjamin Sisko, where he looks back on what he's done, what's happened. And he says,
"So, I lied. I cheated. I bribed men to cover the crimes of other men. I am an accessory to murder. But the most damning thing of all, I think I can live with it. And if I had to do it all over again, I would." Garrick was right about one thing. A guilty conscience is a small price to pay for the safety of the Alpha Quadrant. So I will learn to live with it. Because I can live with it. I can live with it. Computer, erase that entire personal log.
And what's so
which is now in a closet at Mar-a-Lago.
What's so powerful about that line is that it really, I think without that line, the episode is less than it would be otherwise. Because I think we needed that peek into Sisko's struggle with that choice, with all of the things that he had to do to ensure the safety of Starfleet, of the members of the Federation, of his crew, of his son. And they weren't really nice things. And it's the reality of the world that we live in. Sometimes, we are faced with horrific actions from others, and they demand a response. It's like the saying about we get to sleep peacefully in our beds because rough men are prepared to do violence on our behalf. Right. And that's what Sisko is talking about.
You know what else he's talking about, Ashley?
That's
the
the
needs
job.
of the many outweighs the needs of the few or the one.
He is, kind of. And he's, and he says needs, which is great. We're getting there, Mark. Are we dead? Did we die?
No.
What happened?
We thought you were going to say
I
something
thought Mark
else,
was going to
but
go
you just,
somewhere.
No, we're waiting
like
for you to
waiting.
say more to continue. Are you done?
No, I thought that you were jumping in with a thing.
I did. I had a little thing I wanted to add, and now you can continue.
Okay. But no, look, I actually think that that's right. I mean, in this case, Sisko is bearing the burden of that choice. He is bearing it alone. It's not a choice he asked anyone else to bear, but he's doing it. But the truth of this show is that all of these characters at one point or another has to make a choice that they have to live with. And it's important, I think, for all of us, because we all, at some point in our lives, may have to make a choice we don't like making.
And have to live with it.
We have to live with it. That's what it means to be human.
And I find it interesting that when some people say the title of this episode, they're quoting it as Jack Napier from the Batman movie, emphasizing the word light in moonlight rather than moonlight. But I just find that interesting.
Okay. So you're saying that, well, the funny thing is that this episode is based on that line, isn't it, Ashley?
I think the title is actually from that, yes.
Yeah, I mean, which is funny.
You dance the devil by the pale moonlight.
It's such an erudite kind of cool, like vintage, original Star Trek type of thing. And you think, where did this come from? It's like he's in the twilight between darkness and light, and which side will he fall on to make this decision? But it's just a quote from Batman '89.
Yes, well, yeah.
So funny.
Anyway,
Rob, you look exhausted. Rob's
I'm not. I was just thinking about the ramifications of, you have a man grappling with the fact that he's condoned murder, which is exactly the opposite of everything that Starfleet stands for, everything that Earth stands for. Ashley talked about earlier that what happens when utopia, when a utopian civilization has to deal with the onslaught of a civilization that isn't utopian. And that's all of Deep Space Nine is really about that. How do we retain our utopian ideals in the face of war or people that don't share our values?
But it doesn't go anywhere.
But the other thing is,
it does. The entire series is about that, though. Of course, it goes somewhere. You see people struggling with this.
I'm saying the criticism that it's got.
Yeah, I know. It's such a powerful moment, because the thing that always haunted me about this is that he will have to live with it for the rest of his life,
right?
And he's going to be haunted by this decision forever. And when he says he can live with it, he's lying.
Yeah.
And that's the best part. He knows he knows he's going to have to, but it will haunt him for the rest of his life.
Okay, I'm going to take a survey now. I want to take a survey poll. Ready? Now it's time for a Treksperts poll. New tradition on here on the Treksperts. Okay, if you faced with the same choice, if you were the commander of Deep Space Nine, would you have done what Sisko did, Darren?
Absolutely. Because it's not murder. See,
it's war.
The differentiation is that most of us in our structure of good and evil agree with the necessary killing of someone who is going to do evil. You know? And that is not murder. And that is looked at differently by, people in the clergy and people in various stages of power.
I'm not sure if that's Hannah Arendt or Minority Report.
But yeah, so absolutely, I am with Sisko on this.
Given the choice, Darren would have done what Sisko did. Would you have done what Sisko did?
Who are you talking to? We lost you there.
Ashley. What would Ashley do?
I absolutely would have done what Sisko did. I mean, especially in context, there really wasn't a choice.
How many people were on that Romulan ship that died?
Doesn't matter, because they were all military. B, and of course that matters, but the consequence of what was going to happen next, it wasn't about covering up a lie and being embarrassed and all that other shit. Mm-hmm. It could have been the Romulans deciding that they were going to join up with the Dominion, or even staying out of the war. It meant death, like on a very large scale. It was a screwed up situation to begin with, but it was the right choice. Absolutely.
Then they would be the Romulans.
They would be.
Now, I'm going to ask Rob the same question, but the question I'm going to ask Rob too is, could it have backfired? What if the Romulans had realized that the Federation was behind this? Then it could have led to the Romulans joining the war on behalf of the Dominion. But what decision would you have made?
Oh, absolutely. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. So I would absolutely have done it. But here's the thing. I bet if the Tal Shiar had found out what was going on, I bet we would have seen a scene where one of the members of the Tal Shiar would have come to Sisko and say, "We know what you did. We agree with it, but we know what you did, and there will be a reckoning."
Oh, I want to see that episode.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And one day I'm going to blame some of the people in this room.
That's right.
And then I do not forgive.
But not today.
Yeah, but I think that would be, because even here's the funny thing. I think, and that would have been a powerful episode too, where their own government colludes, finds out, but a necessary evil, because even the Romulans faced with the Dominion threat aren't stupid.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things I can't stand about our modern age is there's no nuance to these things anymore. Mm-hmm. That immediately is like, it's easy for people to just pick a side when the consequences either way will never affect them.
Right.
So they're able to say whatever the hell they want.
But particularly when they don't understand the context or the history.
Not at all. And there's also this phenomenon that has become incredibly prevalent thanks to social media of moral narcissism, right? Which is idea that your ideas, the things that you believe, make you good. So if there is someone who does not believe what you believe, they are by definition bad.
Yeah.
So you will become a walking, talking Manichaean heresy of a split between good and evil. So when you are confronted with the truth of the consequences of what you believe, you reject it. So you end up doing things like pulling down, pictures of hostages from walls, because your brain cannot process the horror.
Or boycotting McDonald's. It's like, come on.
Or gluing your hands to the asphalt.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a weird situation that we live in a society now where I admire people's desire to do the right thing. But on the other hand, they don't live in the real world, and then nothing is nuanced, and they feel like their act of goodness or kindness or righteousness or whatever is the end all be all of anything. Right. And they don't understand.
And it means something.
And that, yes,
but it only means something to them.
And the funny thing about this episode is it's putting the decision. I mean, Mark, the question you asked us is the question that every member of the audience for this episode asks themselves at the end.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah. Astute viewers.
Right.
Would I do?
Astute. Mahoma.
By the way, the point I was making about McDonald's, but you looked flummoxed, was that there is apparently a pro-Palestinian boycott among the TikTok generation to boycott McDonald's because McDonald's gave the IDF a bunch of food. Okay, McDonald's is franchises. It was a franchisee in Israel who gave the IDF a bunch of food. Had nothing to do with McDonald's. They're like, boycott McDonald's. This is how just ridiculous people are about so many not understanding context.
There are so many groups that want to have a good feeling about themselves. And
they get a hit off of it.
They are aching for making a mark on society in what they think is right. And
no, I think there was, go ahead.
No, and there are a lot of people taking actions that are only for them. And it's not for any greater good. It's only for their self-image.
Look, we've done this show for 4 years, and I think you will never hear a more 5 years, a more cogent and well-reasoned and insightful observation than Ashley just gave us when he described moral narcissism. Yeah. I've never heard that term before. I don't know if that's something that other people have used, but it is. You will not hear anything smarter on this podcast, how in the past or in the future, than what Ashley just articulated in his description of moral narcissism.
All right,
so
thank you a lot to make up for.
What? I know.
I said I had a lot to make up for because generally I say stupid shit.
Stupid shit. Still doesn't make up for Cloak and Dagger, but you're close.
No. What does?
No. Okay. Well, speaking of war and moral relativism, Robert Meyer Burnett, tell us what our pick for number 5 is.
Now, this is a part of an exchange, but I'm going to read the exchange because it's mostly a Shatner monologue that's broken up by comment. So I love this. I have to say that this comes from a first season original series episode that I've always considered to be what I call a meat and potatoes episode of Star Trek, but it's probably the best example of a meat and potatoes episode. And what I mean by that is it's not a classic episode like Doomsday Machine or Trouble with Tribbles or Amok Time or City on the Edge of Forever. But it is one of those workaday episodes that you watch. It's incredibly entertaining. It has a very interesting science fiction concept, and it has great philosophy in it. Mm-hmm. And it never shows up on anyone's 10 best list, but I particularly love this episode. And it is called A Taste of Armageddon. And just to wit, it is about a civilization that is at war with another civilization, but they've normalized war. They're fighting it with computers, so nothing actually gets blown up. But if you live in a city that's been virtually attacked, it's your duty to report to its disintegration station, walk in, be disintegrated, and you're dead. You're gone. And of course, they've normalized war, and it's horrific. And of course, Spock and Kirk realize this, and it's terrible. And Kirk is talking to the leader, Anon 7, the elected leader of this planet, about what is going on. And he says,
it's instinctive. The instinct can be fought. We're human beings with the blood of a million savage years on our hands. But we can stop it. We can admit that we're killers, but we're not going to kill today. That's all it takes. Knowing that we're not going to kill today.
Peace or utter destruction. It's up to you.
What I love about that, Rob, is we now know what that scene would have been like if Jerry Seinfeld had performed it.
Who are these people who just walk into these chambers?
Oh my God!
I thought your reading
was great,
Rob.
Have you ever thought about walking into a chamber and getting disintegrated?
Well, there you go. It's a monologue, but I think it's a great monologue, and it's Kirk laying it all out. I mean, you know, Star Trek frequently, as of course Deep Space Nine frequently dealt with war and what it meant, but in this, the idea that war was normalized. And that it was made acceptable to a culture that had been fighting the same war for 500 years is horrifying.
Captain Buck Rogers.
It's terrifying. And they're fighting it with computers. And what's really interesting is, yes, of course, the production design might seem a little clunky, even though when I was a kid, it was the coolest thing ever. If you think about that, we're not too far away. Like, it's an episode where even maybe more so now than it was back in 1966, 67, I could see a human future where something like this happened to us. And I think that's the great thing about Star Trek and great science fiction.
Well, in a way,
It's
it already
plausible.
has, because you talk about the forever wars in the Middle East. You know, what were called the forever wars, first Iraq, later Afghanistan. They were called forever wars, right? Because once you're in, nobody had the balls to get out, you know, and Taste of Oregon sort of deals with that. Obviously, it has the sci-fi twist of going to extermination chambers, that they're all numbers and statistics. And of course, this was also a statement about Vietnam, where the way that people related, they didn't necessarily know people in Vietnam, certain people, but it was just a statistic on the news. Walter Cronkite would say, 6,000 people died in Vietnam today. And it was just a number on a TV screen. And so, again, each Star Trek really having something to say about the contemporary situation that no one else would tackle, right? No one was really on television was going to go and deal with Vietnam in the thick of the Vietnam conflict. Even feature films like, MASH did it through the lens of the Korean War because they couldn't call it, Vietnam. You didn't really start to see Vietnam movies start to happen until the mid to late 70s after Nixon had already left, right? His Peace with Honor, which was anything but Peace with Honor. But, Star Trek was dealing with it in 66, 67.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I think the most salient point was probably just the idea of the statistics, right? And how dehumanizing the statistics are.
Mm-hmm. When Barbara Boston is just going to step into a disintegration because she's considered a casualty by the computer.
Well,
what a brilliant concept that is.
Her hairdo was talking to her.
Yeah, that's very true.
Okay, versus some guy who made all the dilithium blow up in the universe because he was upset.
Darn it. Stupid dilithium. I hate you.
I mean, come on. This is storytelling at such a high level, and it's about something substantive.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In the guise of entertainment.
And it was
here we are
novel.
40 years later talking about this vercocked episode.
50.
But it's not that's the thing.
Darren.
It's not a vercocked episode. To me, it's a great, I love this episode of Star Trek. It has Anon 7 is a great antagonist.
Yeah.
He is.
You got Barbara Babcock, right?
David Apache.
Barbara Boston.
Boston.
Barbara Babcock. You're right.
Yeah, Barbara
Babcock.
Mark said Barbara
Boston
was
Stephen Bochco's wife.
Yeah.
It's Barbara Babcock, who's in Hill Street Blues.
Who we see again. And she actually, we hear her voice a couple of times.
That's
not
right.
just in this episode.
She's Trelane's mother.
Yeah. And
she gets around.
She gets around.
Trelane does not have to come to school today. Signed, Trelane's mother. Trelane's mother is rotten to the core, but great to the infantry.
But it's horrible. This is a great, I think it's a great episode. It's a great speech. They blow up computers in this episode. And it's the only thing that I've always wanted to know is, what did Vendikar look like?
I know, right?
I wanted to see Vendikar. I have always wanted to see what their weapons would have looked like.
It's a whole line of vending machines.
Yeah. In cars. They're sentient vending machines.
Cars. So maybe
took over
Rob's,
like Skynet.
Jerry Seinfeld, Captain Kirk could be driving around the vending machines.
I didn't think I did Jerry Seinfeld.
Rob, it was good. It's not easy to do Shatner, as we know. The two people who do it well, Darren Docterman and Aaron McCormick. The rest are all posers.
Yeah, and I'm not an actor.
No, it was good. You hit all the important, beats.
But no, I do think that this episode has that. It's got that thing going on. So I think it's peak Star Trek.
Yep.
And it has a photo novel.
And it has a photo novel. But one thing we didn't talk about, we talked about the idea and the episode. The speech itself
is
great. And Gene Kuhn wrote this. This is very early in his run with the show. And he came in, and obviously Arena, Devil in the Dark, Taste of Armageddon. But this is one of the great speeches in Star Trek history. And Shatner, just like a dog with a bone, he tears it up.
Yeah.
I mean, it is
without
amazing.
harming the scenery.
That's right.
how good he is, and how he sells it. But so many great quotes within the monologue. That's what makes it a thing.
Yeah. And we're sorry Mark keeps freezing up, but
he's phasing in and out of our space-time
continuum.
It's
so funny because I remember when we were doing Free Enterprise and Eric McCormick gives that speech about that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. But it was, at the line was the Shatner monologue works every time, right? That was our line. And then Shatner says, no, it's the Kirk monologue. But it really is the Shatner monologue. He's describing it to the character, but it's Shatner who sells it.
Oh, yeah.
As only he can. I wish we hadn't changed that.
Let's face it. Chris Pine can't do that.
He can't. And we all like Chris Pine as Kirk, but
absolutely,
he's playing Kirk. He isn't Kirk.
No.
Shatner is Kirk. Everyone else is playing Kirk. And Paul Wesley is playing like a gas station attendant. I don't know what.
Yes.
The funny thing is I like him as a performer. I just don't like him as
Paul
Kirk.
Wesley? Me too. Yeah. I like him a lot.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have cast him in this role. I would have known he wasn't right for it. I think he's terrific. I like him in everything I've seen him in.
If they had made him a new original character, I do not understand Strange New World's predilection of wanting to bring back old characters that they didn't create.
I do.
From a financial standpoint and a standpoint of making a TV show, I would think they'd want to create all new characters that they own, that people will other than Pike and Boyce or whatever, even though he's not there. It's strange to me that they keep bringing back legacy characters.
They're all guilty of being envious of the popularity of those original characters. That's why they do that.
And the thing is, Paul Wesley, though, I don't even see him as Kirk. I try and see him as somebody original. And when the third episode of the second season, where he's a different universe version, I'm like, I like this guy.
Yeah.
He's not Kirk, but I like what he's doing. And I like his presence, and I like the kind of person he is. And why does he have to be
more than other people on this podcast, Rob?
Anyway, we've drifted
and that's
off
strange
course.
for me coming from,
Yes, it's very strange for you.
Very strange, new worldy. But we were asked to only talk about the things we love, not the things we don't. So, in respect to that,
don't give in to hate.
We will move on
to the dark side.
We'll move on to number
4.
Number 4, and we're back to Daren Dochterman, who will reveal our number 4 quote.
I will reveal number 4. This is possibly the longest quote that we have in our list, but it has to be done in its entirety because it is indeed that Kirk monologue that Mark alluded to earlier from Return to Tomorrow, which of course is the episode where Kirk, Spock, and Dr. Pulaski switch bodies with basically desk lamps. And comedy ensues, and Nimoy, at perhaps his scariest, creates havoc. So this is when Kirk is trying to convince the members of his staff that they should go forth and do this thing, the transfer of mind energy with these strange new aliens. And he brings them into the conference room, and he says this.
Do you wish that the first Apollo mission hadn't reached the moon, or that we hadn't gone on to Mars and then to the nearest star? That's like saying you wish that you still operated with scalpels and sewed your patients up with catgut, like your great-great-great-great-grandfather used to. I'm in command. I could order this. But I'm not. Because Dr. McCoy is right in pointing out the enormous danger potential in any contact with life and intelligence as fantastically advanced as this. But I must point out that the possibilities, the potential for knowledge and advancement is equally great. Risk is our business.
That's what the starship is all about. That's why we're aboard her. You may dissent without prejudice. Do I hear a negative vote?
A negative vote?
Nope, not at all. I'm convinced.
I'm convinced.
Me too.
You had me at hello.
The way Shatner eats through this is amazing. And to me, it shows not only the quality of Captain Kirk as a monologist, but the ability of Shatner to make every line meaningful and dramatic at the same time. It's fascinating, and I love it, and I can't get enough of it.
Well, obviously, Rob and I love it because we feature this monologue prominently in Free Enterprise. In fact, it's the crux on which Mark's character, played by Eric McCormick, gets Claire, played by Audie England, to go back to Robert, played by Rafer Weigel. Right. And it's we use this monologue.
Which is a bad idea.
It works in the movie. And I'll just never forget, Eric took it so seriously. We gave them a reference tape, which had all the references in the movie, which is a very long tape. And I wish we still had that, Rob. And obviously, he would just study the scene, but in particular, Shatner's mannerisms when he sits at the table, when the mouth opens and curls up, and he didn't want to rehearse. It was one time he didn't want to. He just like roll camera so he could do it, and we were in awe of him.
It's the first take in the film.
Yeah.
It's the first take, and we did it like 6 times. But,
so great. But the first was the best.
And it's tough because the reason obviously when you rehearse, it's not just for performance or anything, but that was a long camera move.
Yeah.
And he's so great in that scene.
Yeah.
And he's just terrific.
But we love that quote. And it's funny. I mean, I'm going to say something, I know you guys didn't disagree. It's not a particularly great episode. It's a meat and potatoes episode at best.
It's a bit wacky. Yeah.
Yeah. But that scene, because this scene could almost drop into any episode.
Yeah.
You know, it's true of almost anything that they've done that's risky. And it's so great. And I love it. I love Shatner's performance. Everything about it is terrific. And at me, it really, again, it's another one of these quotes that's at the very heart of what we love about Star Trek.
Yeah.
So that brings us, we're getting down to it. And if that's number 4, you can only imagine what we have left in store for you, kids and cats and Catarinas. That brings us to number 3, and Ashley Edward Miller.
So we've talked a bit, even on this episode, about Star Trek as allegory. Now, look, I have never been one to subscribe to the theory that allegory for social issues is what made Star Trek great. Any idiot can do that, okay? What made Star Trek great was Star Trek was incredibly well written and well acted and well made, and the stories had themes and they were about something. But yes, when Star Trek addressed issues that were relevant to all of us, they did so allegorically, even if it's something like, making our obsession with casualty statistics in Vietnam into a story where every casualty is just a statistic. Okay. But once upon a time, there was a Star Trek episode where there was no allegory, where what we saw was what we got. And it was unexpectedly one of the best Star Trek episodes ever produced, any series, brilliantly acted by Avery Brooks, Far Beyond the Stars, in which he plays 2 roles himself. Well, he's not playing Avery. He's playing, Benjamin Sisko, having dreams about a science fiction writer from the 50s named Benny Russell. And Benny is struggling to create a career as a science fiction writer. And his struggles emerge from the fact that he is Black. And the establishment around him they not only don't believe in him, they don't want him to succeed in spite of his brilliance, in spite of his ideas and his commitment. And what we see is not just Sisko sort of struggling with this back and forth, right? It's a bit like The Inner Light, except it's consequential and it means something for the character. Did I just say that? Sorry.
You said the quiet part out loud.
Sisko is struggling with this, but on the Benny Russell side, it's a descent into madness for Benny Russell. It's a madness that's born both of his creativity and also the fact that he is stymied at every turn. And one of the things that I appreciate most about this episode is that there's never really an answer as Sisko traveling through time. If he's not traveling through time and it's just a dream, well, then is it really a Star Trek episode? Is it really a science fiction episode? Well, it is. If you consider the possibility, life is it merrily, life is but a dream. But there's also this possibility, and Sisko himself articulates it for us.
But maybe, just maybe, Benny isn't the dream. We are. Maybe we're nothing more than figments of his imagination. For all we know, at this very moment, somewhere far beyond all those distant stars, Benny Russell is dreaming of us.
Because the story that Benny Russell is writing is the story of a space station called Deep Space Nine. Mm-hmm. And the people who are aboard her, and the risks that they take, and the dangers that they face, and the issues that they struggle with. Some of the more brilliant touches in this episode include, and you'd only really truly appreciate it if you've been in a television writer's room, especially one that uses cards. But you go into his office and written on every wall are story beats, right? Like in a TV writer's room, you'd have it all over the whiteboards. Mark, I know that you've seen that and experienced that and done that. I've done that. And there's something about it that is extremely real. And again, the truly
Can
arresting...
I interject something, Ashley?
Sure,
and I don't want to interrupt, but I feel like I have something to add to this conversation.
Yeah.
I don't normally like when Star Trek gets meta. Like, I don't like in First Contact. What are you, some kind of Voyagers on a Star Trek? It breaks the fourth wall for me, and I'm not a fan. I think because I love Star Trek so much, I want to pretend that it's real, right? However, I think there is something so powerful about the meta nature of this that they're basically saying, Benny Russell is dreaming of us. And it's that Saint Elsewhere, that all these shows exist in the snow globe. And I kind of feel like that is what this is saying. And I know it's something Ira Bear wanted to go further with, that Star Trek really is a dream of Benny Russell, that he really is Gene Roddenberry. And I love that aspect of this quote and that episode. And it's something that I normally don't like in my Star Trek. But in this case, I think it's done to perfection.
I agree. I'm with you. I don't like it when the fourth wall gets broken. And what makes this episode truly work is that both Benny and Sisko are struggling. And they are both kind of caught up in the weirdness of this reality and what it means. Right. And every beat of the story is about that. And it's not just about Deep Space Nine, it's about Star Trek. It's about where we've been, how far we've come, where we're going, but how we have to struggle with it. And I'm glad that Ira didn't come down with a definitive answer, because I think what makes it powerful is that Sisko is right. Sisko is right. But if the story had simply made him right, it would have been, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And suddenly not so powerful anymore.
And plus, there's the whole wonderfulness of the Wizard of Oz factor, where you were there and you were there and you were there. I really like that aspect of it.
Pay no attention to Klingon behind the curtain.
Right.
But I thought you were going to go even further. How these characters would in Oz and in Kansas were the same. And I love the idea of casting all these characters out of prosthetics, like Armin.
That's exactly what I mean.
And Casey Biggs and that it's and Renee. It's so terrific. Yeah. It's such an inventive episode and really powerful. And again, it's another example where you can see, Avery really tearing into it because obviously he directed it, but also because it meant something. It's the most meaningful episode to him.
Yeah. And
that comes across in the performance and everything about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
I agree.
Speaking of meaningful, we're down to our second greatest Star Trek quote of all time. And to tell us what it is, we look back to Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, I mean, there's a argument to be made that maybe this is one of the most well-known quotes from Star Trek. And in a way, it has kind of dual meanings in a way. And the quote is, I'll just say it from our favorite Vulcan. It actually signifies an entire culture, entire species, the Vulcans themselves. And that is, of course, live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.
I've killed my captain.
Can you say it like Jerry Seinfeld?
No. Live long and prosper.
I'll say it like Lincoln.
I love this quote. The idea of it is so affirming, and the word prosper can be used. I mean, an individual can be prosperous. You can become self-actualized, or you can be prosperous in your endeavors. Mm-hmm. In your work or your the things that you want to do in your life. And I just love the fact that that's their greeting, or they say hello and farewell in the same way. I love this. And in a way, it's like shalom, and mm-hmm. it is a great way to live. I think it's in a way you could say it's emotional because it does have something to say about sentient beings and it's I think the funny thing about this is it's uplifting. It is emotional in the sense that it's encouraging and it's hopeful. It's all of these things, but it's also just very utilitarian. Why wouldn't you want a fellow being, a fellow traveler in this universe to live long and prosper? It's just a wonderful sentiment. It's so quick, but whenever you hear it, whenever Spock says it or anyone else, when you meet Surak in the Savage Curtain, and you hear anyone else say this, it has that same gravitas, that same importance. And I love it, and as a little kid, I loved hearing it. And as a middle-aged man with one foot in the grave, I love hearing it just as much. And maybe it has more meaning to me now.
Wow.
Although I think, to be honest, to me, it has been a little overused over the years. To me, when I hear it now, it has lost a little bit of its power.
Well, because they have too many people saying it.
Yeah, and it's used too fluently, too often in situations that don't need it.
Well, it's become a Star Trek crutch.
Yeah, it's become a bumper sticker.
What the best time it was ever used? When
the best time's the worst of times?
When Celia Lowsky says to him at the end of a muck time, live long and prosper. Yeah. And he says, I shall do neither, for I've killed my captain and my friend.
That's right.
And,
but also, I think we're assuming that this is the only Vulcan greeting. I don't think it's the only Vulcan greeting. I think they have a greeting for every occasion.
Right. Like, what's up, my Vulcan?
Equally distanced and logical. So that's my headcanon about it, that I think this is only one of many pithy sayings that Vulcans give you.
Yeah, but what's so great about it is that it's in English. It's not like Klingonese where it's like, oh, kapla, whatever. I think it has meaning to us. I think it lands because it's in English. And it has, we all know how Leonard was influenced by his Jewish upbringing and how he got the idic from,
the Vulcan hand signal.
The Vulcan hand
came from Gene.
No, I don't mean idic, but like the Vulcan hand idic.
Yeah.
From
the Kohanim.
From a temple. And there's something Talmudic about live long and prosper.
Absolutely.
That it works in English, but it doesn't sound like English, like it's English, but it sounds like a philosophical.
It's kind of inverted.
We've only heard
specificity.
It does sound This is, we're listening to a translation. You know, the sentiment comes from the Vulcan language, but this is the translation.
It really means
you couldn't pronounce
excellent to each other and party on.
I'll tell you what it really is.
Yeah, I mean,
because Rob, here's what you unlocked for me, and after 50 some odd years of loving Star Trek and hearing this phrase, I hadn't thought about it. When you compared it to shalom, I suddenly realized, live long and prosper. What a wonderful phrase. It means no worries for the rest of your days. Live long and prosper. I mean, come on.
Well, what's interesting is shalom means hello, goodbye, and peace, right? So the idea of live long and prosper does sort of encapsulate those kind of thoughts.
Mahalo.
I know what you were doing there, Ashley. I recognize what you were doing. No one else
Thank you, Dad.
did.
Yeah, we got it. We just chose to ignore it.
Oh,
because he already scored as many. He put all those points on the board before with. So we can't be too praiseworthy of Ashley. It'll go to his head. Gotta keep him honest.
I think if you said that, other than maybe beam me up, but live long and prosper, I think is one of those, you can say that to just about anybody around the world and they would know what you meant.
But, it's interesting. The reason I'm not giving anything away to say beam me up is not on our list is it's kind of like Play It Again, Sam in Casablanca. Nobody ever said Play It Again, Sam. Nobody ever said beam me up, Scotty. It's one of those things that have entered the popular culture but been perverted. And like in Casablanca, there are 100 more lines that are better than Play It, Sam.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the same thing with Beam Me Up. There's a million lines in Star Trek that are better than Beam Me Up, other than probably, I hate to say this, in Star Trek 3. Where it's great.
Why would you do this?
Where the way that Christopher Lloyd does it, and then and then when Kirk imitates him to get beamed up, it's so ridiculous, but I love it. But I don't think Beam Me Up, like Live Long and Prosper, it has something, it has an artistry to it, right? It means something. Beam Me Up, it's just, it's like get on the bus. What does it mean, exact change? I mean, it's just a mode of transportation.
Hey, let's go, guys.
It's like the subways here.
It's calling an Uber.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
No, it's a great phrase. It's iconic. It only could ever be associated with Star Trek, and I've always loved it. I think it's great.
I want to point out Rob has used the word iconic correctly, and which is why I'm not throwing a fit about the use of the word iconic, because indeed, Live Long and Prosper is an iconic phrase.
It is iconic. And do people use iconic wrongly?
Yes.
Oh my God, Rob, we talked about this. Haven't you noticed? Everyone uses the word for everything.
Yeah.
Everything is iconic now.
Except when referring to the Iconians.
Yes.
Every press release, every article, every post, the iconic this, the iconic that, they're iconic.
I don't like that.
It's like moist now. Wait, what?
No, it's not like moist. It's just an awful word. Iconic's a great word, but it's misused. And I'm not going to go on a rant about this again because I already did it 2 weeks ago. Okay. So that is our number 2. But before we reveal our number 1 pick. And I know you probably have no clue. You all thought it was going to be Q, and it was Space Nazis on Villains. So you have no idea where we're going with this. We're going to do our honorary mentions, which you may have a better idea of what we're going to do with that. So, Robert Meyer Burnett, what's your honorary mention for best Trek quotes of all time?
Well, I use this all the time in my personal life and in my professional life all the time. Again,
not now, Madeline.
They threw me a few curves.
No, I wasn't. No, it's from my favorite episode of the original series, which is second season's Mirror, Mirror, Jerome Bixby. And it's at the end of the episode, Kirk is going to be beamed back to his own universe, and he's talking to Mirror Spock, and he's trying to make one last plea, one last go at Spock, knowing that Spock in the Mirror universe is like his own Spock, and he's trying to say, look, dude, come on. And he says,
in every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
And, he goes on. But in every revolution, there's one man with a vision. It's something that I don't know if there's revolutions always happening in my life, but, even if I'm reading a book or something, I think, I feed my dogs at night. I think in every revolution, there's one man with a vision, and they look at me expectantly to get their food. I try and impart this wisdom to them. They don't listen, but maybe one day they will. And
I think, Rob, isn't that quote really about any one person can make a difference?
Yeah, it's all about your own life. In your own life, you are the person. It's the same thing as boldly go, where no one has gone before, no man has gone before. The revolution is your life, and you're the only person that can make a difference. And that's why I've always loved it.
And the revolution will not be televised.
And it's interesting because Spock himself I really believe that he feels that it is illogical to try and attempt change. And he's thought that his whole life. He's just trying to get by. He's just trying to make it through another day. And I think in meeting the Kirk, our Kirk, I think it has a really profound impact on him. And because Spock has never been talked to this way before. And I think that our Kirk, it's really, and if you read David Mack's duology about the Mirror Universe, Sorrows of Empire and Rise Like Lions, you see just how much of an impact Kirk's speech has on him. And I think it's great.
Yeah, because it's just saying whether, Rosa Parks, all these people, one person can make a difference. So it's like, don't give up because you think it's impossible to overthrow the system or to make, change. You can be that person that brings about change. And the fact is Spock, with all his logic, all his genius, it's Kirk that inspires him to action. Yep. It's one of the reasons I think we didn't like in Deep Space Nine that the Empire was brought down because Spock tried to fix it, right? Because that was the one thing I hated about the Deep Space Nine mirror episodes, that they said basically the Earth, the Terran Empire was destroyed because Spock, brought it down. I think that's a terrible message. I think like Spock was going to bring down this fascist state and bring democracy and be like, transformative. And instead, him taking action turns out to be a horrible thing, right? Yeah. But I guess I'm not sure the Klingons are the Bajorans or whatever. But it was, it's just such a powerful. It's so powerful, and everything there, the performances, the dialogue, the music in Mirror Mirror, it's just so powerful. And for an episode which is, has all these really big moments, there's a great fight scene. There's, Shatner hamming it up as the evil Kirk. And in that case, it's right to say he's hamming it up, but in a great way. It's such a wonderful, powerful, compelling moment. One of the great moments in Star Trek. I'm sure it was on our list when we did great Star Trek moments, but an absolutely great piece of dialogue as well.
100%. I love it.
Okay. That was in every revolution. There's one man with a vision. And of course that man could be a woman. It could be anything, but somebody who has the vision of seeing change and being, affecting that change. It's a really powerful thought.
What does it mean? Exact change.
But so that was Rob's honorary mention. Now that brings us to Ashley and his honorary mention for the best Star Trek quote of all time.
So, look, if my honorary mention was going to be a function of how often I repeat the quote, my honorary mention would be, "I love Italian, and so do you." But that's not the quote. Although it would be kind of awesome if it were, now that I think about it. It would be a perfect Wednesday pick, but it's not Wednesday. I was actually going to pick something else, but the conversation that we've been having that's been weaving through all of these quotes really stuck with me. And Darren, you sort of half quoted this earlier. It's a quote from Major Kira in By Inferno's Light, which is the second part of a two-parter, Purgatory's Shadow, By Inferno's Light, in which a whole lot of stuff happens, man. But the major thing that happens, other than Dr. Bashir is a changeling, and the Cardassians turn around and screw us, right? Thanks, Gul Dukat. Kira says something that I think has incredible resonance and always will have incredible resonance and fits nicely the theme that we've been talking about. And she says, and I think it's to Zial, Ducat's daughter.
Everyone has their reasons. That's what's so frightening. People can find a way to justify any action, no matter how evil.
Pretty wise, pretty simple. And it's, again, one of those things we're seeing all around us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
Really good.
It's always saying, look under the surface for, what the real motivation is. And it's interesting because that's also true of negotiation. You got to understand what the person really wants as opposed to what they're saying. It's look under the surface and just don't accept things at face value. It's a really, really great quote. Again, the writing on Deep Space Nine, I think is really the most elevated of all the shows, in terms of certainly on par with the original series, in terms of grappling with, real philosophical and political issues that many of the other shows sort of shied away from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great quote. Okay, well, that brings us now to DAREN DOCHTERMAN and his pick for the honorary mention for Best Star Trek Quote.
This has always been one of my favorite quotes. And it's interesting that I didn't see it in any of the research that we had, because I think it's not only is it fun to remember, but it is absolutely true. And it is something that Spock says in Amok Time to Stan, the unfortunate fellow who is stuck.
The unfortunate fellow. I love it.
Is stuck.
Good luck, buddy.
With the conniving T'Pring. And Spock takes an aside with him and he says, you may find that having is not so pleasing a thing after all as wanting. It is not logical, but it is often true. I think that is so cool and so real.
Certainly true of all my ex-girlfriends.
But it's this
Spock's too.
It's this bunch of wisdom that is thrown at us from nowhere. And, Stan's look at after that is, he looks astonished, really. But I love that. I love that moment, and Spock is cool.
What I love about that whole sequence is that she is as on top of her game as anyone.
Oh, she's amazing.
She's so logical.
Yeah.
She's figured out. She got this whole chess game figured out.
Out-logicked Spock, which makes her worthy of Spock, which makes it all the more crazy. Yeah.
It's another reason why I think other depictions of her have been less satisfying for us.
Yeah.
Because, her character is like fucking just badass.
Yeah.
She's so smart. That's a great quote, Darren. It's a great quote from Amok Time. It just goes to show, I mean, this is such a deep well of quotes. We could have done 101 quotes, but...
all from TOS.
And we nearly did.
All from TOS. It'd be like that Star Trek Speaks book that Rob talked about. We could just do a whole book. Look, for my honorary mention, look, there's so many great, funny quotes, but I don't want to go with the funny quote. Just like, you hit me, Picard never hit me, in Q-less, and I'm not a merry man.
Right.
And, I look, even in Picard, there was it wasn't until this moment when I was reunited with all of you, I realized what I miss most, the carpet. I love all those quotes, and there's so many of them. All the Star Treks, I think, have some funny quotes, except for one or two of these shows, which had no sense of humor. But most of them have these great quotes. Ashley alluded to it too. You like Italian. I like Italian, so do you. But I want to go with something more substantive. I was thinking, maybe
substantive.
Maybe I go with, let's make sure that history never forgets the name Enterprise. That Churchillian Captain Picard in the alternate universe right before he charges into battle. But it's like, that's not like, there's not an artistry to that. It's just a great quote, right? It's just, but there's not a literacy to it. It's just like, okay, that's cool, right? So I'm going to go with a quote from Picard season 3, and it's not the quote you would think. It's a quote from Jack Crusher.
Oh, funny. I've always known the world was imperfect. Broken systems, wars, suffering, violence, poverty, bigotry. And I always thought if people could only see each other, hear each other, speak in one voice, act in one mind together. Who knew a little cybernetic authoritarianism was the answer?
And I think there's so many great quotes. There's also, I mean, obviously in No Win Scenario, the whole thing about Starfleet. Starfleet's the only family I ever needed. That could easily been my quote too. But that's less about the actual quote than it's about the scene. So it's really a great Star Trek moment, not a great quote like this. And I don't particularly love this scene, but I love this quote. And so that's my quote from Picard season 3 for my honorary mention.
Wow. Good one.
I'll go with that.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So
the collective approves.
So those are our honorary mentions. But man, it's like, like Darren said about this Amok Time quote, thinking about it, 100 more quotes come to mind.
Yeah.
And I think we used about all of them at Free Enterprise at one point.
Hundreds of thousands.
Galaxies disintegrate, but a woman always remains a woman. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many. It's just, this is a fool's errand. 10 quotes. Come on. Anyway, that brings us to number 1, the greatest Star Trek quote of all time. And to reveal our pick, we look to you, Darren Doctorman. We look to you, Mrs. Robinson, to tell us what our pick for the greatest Star Trek quote of all time is.
Well, I think anyone who hasn't guessed what this is simply isn't paying attention. Because it is the quote. It represents Star Trek to the vast wasteland of people who have never seen Star Trek. They know of this quote. And it is, there are 2 versions of it. And I'm choosing to give the later version. In the spirit of amity and being friends with our younger fans who grew up with this show, and it is the pretty much the greatest split infinitive to ever have been popularized.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before.
Yeah, so it's that one. I've
heard it.
It's the gunshot that starts the race of Star Trek. It is the it is the preamble to all of the wonder that we enjoy. And it sets the stage and it points us the way. And I've always loved it. And, Shatner read it better, but, Jean-Luc did it well.
But if we'd only heard it from Jean-Luc and not Shatner, it might have still been as iconic.
Yeah, perhaps. Yes. But, we were spoiled.
And the funny thing is Shatner kind of read it on stage in a corner. It was like, between takes. I mean, it was kind of like, this thing that we now consider like this legendary piece of television.
He threw it off in an afternoon. In an
afternoon.
Star Trek main title narration.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Another one. Maybe a little slower. Right. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Can you play that back?
Play this back on the recording.
Yeah.
And its whole creation is so fascinating because, you know, you look at it and it's kind of a bunch of people, you know, together. It's like, you know, Roddenberry had his conception.
One of them named Peoples.
Black and Sam Peoples. And so, you know, it kind of is this mishmash of ideas, but together they created something monumental.
Stronger with you than without you.
And, you know, because obviously their various iterations of this were terrible. So it just goes to show, like, just changes in a few commas and a few words, how it elevates it and it makes it into literally television history, when it could have easily been just clunky and dumb.
Well, and as we learned in Make It So, Sir Patrick's autobiography, Sir Patrick listened to Shatner's reading over and over again. And he decided that it couldn't be done better, so he would just try and do it equally well.
I love that he gives Shatner credit in the memoir when he says that. I was really pleased because, you know, most people don't. They talk about what great friends they are. They did not get along that great during the making of the movie. Or at least they say they did. God, they say they got along, but they did not. There's not a huge love there. I think Bill likes Patrick more than Patrick loves Bill. Right. But he was very kind to Bill. You know, he treated him like the Neil Armstrong he was, as it should be. So I give Patrick a lot of credit for that. But this is an amazing, and look, either version. You know, I've always looked at it as when they say man, to go where no man has gone before, mankind.
Of course.
It wasn't like only men are going, not women.
Right.
But it obviously it's a good change to no one. It's smart. It's inclusive. It's more right. But to me, that, you know, it's that original Shatner reading that resonates with me. And the 5-year mission. There's a thing in television called a saga cell. And a saga cell is something that's cut usually in the early seasons of a show that is a complicated mythology to explain what it is. Right. There's usually clips and things like Buffy. She is the Slayer, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Commander Buck Rogers.
What Star Trek does so well is this is the saga cell in 2 sentences of what Star Trek is. All you have to do is watch the opening credits to get what the show is. You don't need any more information than these few sentences. It's really remarkable.
It's like the Gilligan's Island theme.
Yeah. And the economy of storytelling, how it distills exactly what this show is in these few lines, and then like you're off to the races.
Yeah.
Rob, what does it mean to you when you hear these words?
Well, I mean, to me, it's a lifestyle choice. I mean, it really is. It's like everyone who chooses to do this is to go out on an adventure, to make the most of what it means to be alive.
Right.
And, you know, to boldly go. And you know, part of the reason we made Free Enterprise, the notion of boldly going is something you do in your own life.
Yeah.
You know, get a passport, boldly go and meet Spanish girls in Spain. You know, and we did. And that's the way to, I think, to do things. And I think that of course, couched in it's all allegorical. It's Star Trek is an action, adventure, science fiction allegory, which is great. But you can choose to boldly go in your own life on a daily basis. It truly is a lifestyle choice. And I think that one of the great things that Star Trek always did was it shows you what might happen when you get somewhere.
Right.
You know, you're going to have an adventure of some kind. You're going to meet people that you've never met before, and you're going to learn something. And hopefully you're going to grow as a person. And at the end of the day, boldly go where no man, or no one has gone before. And I think that is a way to live your life. And I've often said to people, and I learned this lesson, actually. I'll tell you when I learned this lesson. I was in high school between my junior and senior year, and I was elected to the student body and the government.
You were not of the body.
There were 6 of us, and we were expected to go to leadership camp for a week. It was like summer camp, but we discuss and it was people from all over Washington State. And what was really interesting is after I did that, I would work during the summer, and I would work at my home videos, my video stores I worked at, and then I would want to be home because I want to see movies on the weekends. But after meeting all these interesting people from all over Washington State, and they were very motivated, I would get invited to these parties, and it was only the people I'd met at a huge party that they were throwing, or somebody from their neighborhood was throwing, people I didn't know. And I consciously made a decision because it was between my junior and senior in high school. I want to have a great senior year. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go. And over that summer, probably 4 or 5 times, I went to these places I'd never been to meet up with a predominantly huge group of people I'd never met. And I had, without exception, a great time. Sometimes a greater time. But I had a great time. But it taught me a lesson that I could have stayed home and did what I always did. Go to work, go to the movies that open Friday night and satiate my interest in all of that. Or I could move out of my comfort zone, go someplace I'd never been and meet a bunch of people I'd never met before. And it was because of this opening monologue. And it changed my life. It really did, because I was very kind of set in my ways in high school. I liked hanging out and partying with people I knew and going to places that were comfortable and going to see whatever movies open on a Friday night and then on Sunday afternoons and all of that. But I made a conscious decision to get out of my comfort zone, to boldly go to someplace I'd never been and boldly go to meet people I'd never met.
Rob, it's so funny because I remember that was a philosophy that was really important to us when we were on the Free Enterprise tour after we made the movie, but before it was released, because we went to Cannes with it, we went to Spain, obviously, with it, and
Edmonton, Winnipeg,
Atlanta. I mean, we were
Hawaii.
And that was a huge thing. We said we're gonna learn all that is learnable, know all that is knowable, but boldly talk to everyone, and just experience these different cultures and not. And it was really let's boldly go. Let's just do it. And that made that so rewarding. That year that we spent traveling around the globe, meeting people was remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, one of the greatest nights of my life was that first night in Spain. And I was trying to, we went to that
I know why.
disco. But I mean, in general, I met this person, I met this beautiful girl named Gemma. And what was really interesting was I was trying to be very respectful and represent our movie and represent America and represent everything. And we had an incredible...
You weren't that respectable.
Well, that was her doing. I was led down the primrose path. But it was interesting because in meeting the people there, especially the first place we really went to was Spain. And that's where the movie had its world premiere. And what was really interesting, Mark, is I was worried, I think you were too, correct me if I'm wrong, our movie was so colloquial and it was so full of American humor.
Slang, yeah.
And I they had subtitled it in both Spanish and Catalan, and I didn't know whether it would play. And we were playing kind of at the end of the festival, but we went for the whole festival. So we're having this really great time and meeting all these people. And we made a lot of friends and we packed that screening. It was
a lot of friends, some of which we're still friends with.
That. We had over 1,000 people in that screening. And it went over like gangbusters. But the first person that we had been hanging out with that worked at the festival, she came out and she walked up to me and walked up to us and she said, I don't know if you remember this. She goes, I did not like your movie. And she said, it made fun of sentimental problems.
Romance.
And I had never heard this term before. And I was like, sentimental, what does that mean? And she explained to me what it was. And she had just gone through a breakup or something. But I loved that. I love that she didn't say our movie was terrible. She didn't like our movie because it made fun of as she'd gone through something.
Yeah.
And she had a response to it that our movie had enough
sentimental problems.
Sentimental problems.
Next time on the Treksperts, the top 10 things women have said to Rob Burnett.
I don't think that would have to be on Apple Podcasts under mature.
Yeah, but it would. I love that. I loved hearing that because that was an actual genuine response to the movie.
Yeah.
And it wasn't whether she liked it or not. It was something within the universe, the in-universe thing of the movie that she had objected to, not the movie itself.
But to bring this back to our episode, what Rob is saying is that this philosophy, people say IDIC and say all this, of boldly going, which came from these are the voyages of Starship Enterprise, to boldly go is what, Star Trek helped fuel this passion to boldly go. And while none of us are going into space anytime, we can travel the globe. We can meet other cultures. We can, experience, the world that they live in, these strange new worlds that they live in to us.
What Rob is saying is that no guts, no Buck Rogers.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Buck Rogers has a gut. And
Okay.
I will simplify it even more, and I'll tell you what it means to me. I mean, all those things that you guys have said are true. But what it always meant to me when I was a kid, when I heard it, it meant one thing. Star Trek is on. That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
Star Trek is on.
100%. It meant Star Trek was on. And Ashley, before we wrap up, I got to ask you, this is the last question. This is the last gate runner. Do you feel, and this is not a slag on the subsequent shows, do you feel not having that opening narration, it hurts some of these other shows, that it is so part of the Star Trek oeuvre, that it's so part of what we identify as Star Trek, that not having an opening, it's like, as much as I love Rogue One, I miss the crawl desperately, right? And
that was a mistake not to have one.
Yeah, totally.
That's Star Wars.
And so does Star Trek suffer when it doesn't have the opening narration? Because I would point out, perhaps the most effective version of this narration was at the end of Star Trek II.
Yes.
It was when Leonard Nimoy does it for the first time.
Right.
It's so powerful. It shows you how powerful those words are. And the fact that he's gone now and that you hear this ethereal voice reciting these powerful words. These are worship words. So do you think that maybe the narration should be brought, or some version of it should be brought back?
Yes and no. I mean, I've always felt that, in as much as it's about a human adventure, I feel like the original series, Next Generation, were encapsulated by the Enterprise. The Enterprise has been special. She will always be special. There are other ships that we can like and we think are cool. Go, Defiant. I love you. But the Enterprise is the Enterprise. And I feel that anything else, that some version of it that says, and these are the voyages of the Starship Voyager. And I think that means I'm leaving the room. Like, it just doesn't have the same, it automatically invites a comparison that show will lose. And not because there aren't worthy episodes of the show, but because the Enterprise, of all the things we've said are iconic, the Enterprise as an idea is iconic. And you can't compete with it with a ship called Voyager or Defiant or shit, even if you're flying around on something that you're telling everybody is the Enterprise. You can't compete with it. You know what I mean? It's just, so I feel like that was probably a good decision.
Great. Okay. Fantastic. Well, look, this is another, these holiday specials are terrific. And I mean, I don't need everybody to validate that, but it's nice to hear that people are really loving them and that we're getting such great feedback. But sitting here with you guys, I got to say, I learned a lot. I thought about a lot of things. This was great. And I'm so appreciative. Rob, we're so happy to have you here again with us to talk
thank you.
Star Trek at a level that I think is very infrequently talked about. I think that's why we get the response. Nobody takes it as seriously, but at the same time, irreverently as we do. You know, it's like we take it serious, but we don't. But there's a fine line to it, right? And and it comes from a place of great love. So this is really, really terrific, and I'm deeply grateful. And I'm deeply grateful to everybody who continues to listen. The holiday specials just have been wildly successful from the outset. So we're grateful to you, and obviously continue to share your thoughts, because we'll be sharing some of those on our wrap-up show, which will air directly after we air the finale, the 10th episode. And we got a few remaining lists that will surprise you. I know you're all wondering, what's the top 10 they're going to do next?
Gonna be.
What is it going to be? I think it might surprise you. Maybe you've guessed by now, but you might not have. In fact, I think you probably haven't, because up until yesterday, we didn't know either.
That's right.
Double dumbass on you.
But thank you, Rob Burnett. Thank you for joining us. As always, you can listen
Always
to
a
him daily
pleasure.
on the Burnettwork at YouTube and check out and help him grow his post-geek singularity, which is going to swallow the universe with its, like the black hole or the black sun in Space 1999. Of course, you can follow us and you can subscribe to our subscriber-only podcast at Trekspertise.com. We got some really great surprises coming next year or this year, as the case may be. So we hope you'll sign up and join us. And we'll be announcing our Inglorious Treksperts live tour, all our dates coming up. But you'll be able to see all 4 of us, I'm sure, at WonderCon in March. So make plans to join us there. And follow us on social and share your thoughts, or you can email us at trekspertplus@gmail.com. So until next week, as the holiday specials continue with another all-new Top 10 Holiday Countdown Special, on behalf of Robert Meyer Burnett, Ashley Edward Miller, Darren Doctorman, and myself, Mark A. Altman, keep on trekking ingloriously, of course, and Happy New Year.